Hi folks, it's Sarah here, and I'm just doing my roundup of week 5. So it's the end of week 5. Look, this week's been a little bit strange. I really have been feeling very flat in myself and just sort of everything this week. My diet's been on point, my training's been on point. I even just sort of on Thursday, actually strangely enough, even though I wasn't feeling particularly good in myself, just sort of from a mental perspective, I actually had an incredibly good training session. We really ramped up the intensity. So my fitness is really starting to come through. What I'm really pleased about is my fitness is really starting to increase. I'm really feeling that I'm beginning to get back to the sort of levels of fitness that by the end of the prep, I'm really just super fit and everything seems to be really, really working. So after sort of 5 weeks now, and I've been adding in these intensification work, the active rest with sort of kettlebell swings and the battle ropes and the sled drives in between my sets, it's really starting to pay off, and I'm starting to feel much fitter and stronger in general. So that's been really good. And like I say, although my diet's been really good and training overall has been really good, I've just been feeling completely flat. Nothing's changed on the scale. I did get on the scales again, and nothing's bloody changed. But what's weird is I'm clearly physically changing. I can see real physical differences now. I'm starting to get a little bit of shape in my chest, which I didn't have last week. I'm really starting to notice some nice shape in my shoulders. And actually, my posing client today, and she's only 2 weeks away from stage, so she's looking fabulous. She even said to me today, "Gosh, you're starting to look really good." So clearly, physically, things are changing, but it's not changing on the scale. Now, what's going on? And this is actually a very common thing on comp prep. Sometimes you can lose for weeks on end, and all of a sudden it just seems to stop, and you just get stuck. And that can be incredibly frustrating and very, very demotivating. Now, it's like I say, it's a very common thing, and there's a phrase that explains it, and it's called a stalls and whooshes. And what happens with a stall and a whoosh is that you might just be going along quite happily, losing the weight. It's coming off regular amounts and stuff like that, and you're really going along well. And like I say, all of a sudden it stops, but you might still continue to see physical changes. Like I'm seeing physical change, but it's just not budging on the scale. So what's going on? Am I in a stall? Now, what often is going on there is that you are still losing fat. So you are losing fat from your fat cells. But the trouble is, those fat cells are being filled with water in the absence of fat. So the fat cells are staying the same size, and they're full of water still. So in theory, they weigh the same. So your fat cell, so although you might be looking leaner, your fat cells are sort of filling with water as the fat is actually being lost from them. And then all of a sudden, what will happen is because the water's not as dense as fat, the fat cell will collapse, expelling all the water, and that's what's known as a whoosh. All of a sudden, you'll just, for no reason at all, for no apparent reason, you'll just drop on the scales, and that's known as a whoosh. Okay, so you get, and this is a very common thing, but it can be an incredibly frustrating thing. And I think women in particular sort of suffer this more than guys. I don't necessarily, I don't really know of any guys who seem to come across this. I mean, guys are so lucky when it comes to fat loss. They are just gifted compared to women. We do have it tough. We really do. So look, if you get to a point in your prep where you've been doing everything right, you swear blind, you've been doing everything right, you've been dropping your calories, increasing your exercise, whatever it is for you, whatever your process is, but it's just not budging on the scales, you could be in a stall. So the thing to do is keep going. You have to trust the process. This is when you really do have to trust the process. This is a phrase you'll hear a lot in comp prep. Trust the process. Okay. Stuff could still be happening underneath, but and this is why you actually do need sort of other ways of measuring other than just a scales. Now, like I say, I know my body. I can really see the physical changes in myself. The fact that other people are commenting on those physical changes is a really good indication that stuff is happening. So if you are in a stall and you are feeling frustrated and just nothing seems to be changing, pay attention to what other people's reaction to you. That's one way, a very good indicator that stuff is still happening. And also pay attention to your clothes. Clothes, again, they will give you an indicator if stuff is still happening, even if on the scales is not happening. Skin folds are another good way of measuring progress, even if the scales are not budging. So, like I say, I've been really a bit flat this week. And one thing I did actually do is I haven't been having, even though I've been doing the ketogenic diet, so it's incredibly high in fat, I haven't been having flax seeds. Now, with my menopausal program, my nutritional menopausal program, one of the superfoods on that program is flax seeds because it's got sort of phytoestrogens in it. It mimics estrogen in the body, and for particularly for menopausal women, this can be a very beneficial food. I've been having flax seeds, I guess for last year, but all of a sudden, I've just stopped taking them, and I don't know why. Well, actually, I do know why, and it's utterly ridiculous. And this is where you have to be when you're on something like a ketogenic diet, which does require you to be a little bit more fixated in a way with your macros and the food you're eating. The reason I actually cut flax seeds out of my diet over the last couple of weeks is because, strangely enough, they're too carby. I've considered them to be too carby. So just like I cut hummus out of my diet, and usually you wouldn't count hummus as a carb, I've cut that one out because it's too carby. Same thing with flax seeds. They're kind of not enough, not fatty enough, and too carby. And I've actually sort of not been having them in favour of things that are more fatty and less carby, just because I've been doing the ketogenic diet. And it just occurred to me all of a sudden that I haven't been having my flax seeds. So I did, on Wednesday and Thursday, I did actually start having my flax seeds, and I do just feel a lot better, just emotionally. So from an emotional perspective, all of a sudden I feel a lot better. Whereas sort of earlier in the week, like I say, I was just feeling really flat and kind of a bit down. Always be paying attention to sort of foods that make you feel good and or feel strong and feel energetic. And like I say, now that I've put the flax seeds in, I am feeling a little bit better sort of from an emotional perspective. Another thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come off the ketogenic diet. Now, I did say that it was only going to be fairly short term, and I think because I'm sort of, although there are physical changes happening, it's still not coming off quickly enough. I know I've got a very long way to go. It's still not coming off as quick as I would like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change my diet this week, and I'm going to flip my macros because I've got to the point with the ketogenic diet where I just can't keep my protein levels high enough. I'm really, really conscious of being below that 1 gram per pound uh, level of protein, which I have been now for probably about 2 weeks. And I'm just really, really conscious, and it's really sort of starting to play on my mind. And I just don't want to be that low on protein anymore. So, what I'm going to do, and my trainer actually came up with a very interesting suggestion that it just hadn't occurred to me. I was just going to flip straight back into my usual high protein, low carb way of being. And actually, this is a very good point. This is why it's incredibly useful to have somebody else that you're working with on comp prep, because it's just useful to, even though you know your stuff, I know my stuff, sometimes it's just nice to have somebody who's completely objective just to bounce ideas off. So, on Thursday with my trainer, I was saying that I was going to change out of the ketogenic diet because I just can't keep my protein high enough, and I'm very, very conscious of it dropping too low, so I start losing muscle, and I'm very, very conscious of preserving my muscle. So I said that I was going to go back into my usual high protein, low carb way of being that I usually do. And he just sort of suggested, he said, well, why don't you go high carb? And I thought, well, that's a bit weird. I've never done a high carb comp prep. And of course, carbs can really sort of help with mood. And like I say, I have been feeling flat, and I went, well, you know what? That actually is not a bad suggestion. If I bump up the carbs, it can really help. It'll actually help me be able to increase the number and types of estrogenic foods, or foods that have estrogenic properties, which could definitely boost my mood and definitely sort of keep my hormones ticking along nicely. So I thought about it for a while and went, you know what, that's not a bad suggestion. So what I'm actually going to do, and you can see it on the screen here, is I've decided that I'm going to set my protein at 1.2 grams per pound, and that gives me 170 grams of protein, which is a nice amount of protein. I'm going to set my fat at 0.3 grams per pound. So it is going to be a lot lower fat than I've been used to, but that gives me 43 grams of fat. And look, that's a decent amount. In 43 grams of fat, I can certainly have my fish oil. I can certainly have almonds, no problems at all. It means I can switch back to really nice. I do prefer lean cuts of meat, so sort of having sort of chicken, chicken drumsticks hasn't really been sort of sitting particularly well. So I can now switch back to a much higher quality lean sort of chicken breast and venison. I've got some lovely venison, so I'm going to cook up a venison stew. So I can really switch my proteins up to some really nice lean high quality proteins, which is great, which are very low in fat. So that's something that I'm quite looking forward to. But with the fats, like I say, I can get at least 5 grams of fish oil in there. I can probably get 10 or 20 almonds in there a day with no problems at all. I can get my CLA in there. I can probably get a boiled egg or two. There's plenty of scope. So although it's not high, it's actually a reasonable amount of fat. And then that gives me leeway at the moment. I'm going to set my calorie level at a 15% deficit. So that gives me 138 grams of carbs to play with. Now, that doesn't sound like a huge amount, but for me, that's actually quite high. Even sort of in my sort of, I guess highest calorie off seasons, I generally don't get much above about 150 grams of carbs. I just don't. But it means I can get some really good high quality complex carbs in there, particularly sort of quinoa and legumes, which will also sort of add in some different sorts of proteins as well. The good thing about this is I can make up my really nice favorite dish, which is khichdi. And this is like this Ayurvedic dish, which is it's hormonal balancing. It's particularly good for women. The herbs and spices that you use are particularly good for women, and balancing out the menstrual cycle. So I'm really, really pleased that I can get my khichdi in. And that's basically a sort of rice, quinoa, and lentil dish with some really, really lovely green vegetables in it that's super easy to digest. And I can throw that onto salads. I can have it hot on its own. I can put all sorts of different meats with it. It's just a really good go-to dish. And I actually popped into my favorite convenience store today because I needed some more protein. And I have a vegan protein. I have this peanut protein from Macro Mike. And I've been having the chopped peanut butter caramel, which is just to die for. It's just divine. But I found this amazing new flavour. So I found Macro Mike strawberry cheesecake peanut protein. So I don't know what that's going to taste like, but I can't. I'm dying to give it a go. But also, in addition to this nice new protein, I found a ready-made khichdi mix. And I've got a photograph of it here. So that's really awesome because I make my khichdi from scratch, and you've got to soak the beans and all the rest of it. Now I can actually go and buy a pre-made packet, which is going to make food prep even easier. So look, that was all really good. Popped into my amazing little convenience store. So very happy there. So now that I've set my macros, so I'm going to have 170 grams of protein, 43 grams of fat, and at the moment I'm on 138 grams of carbs, which gives me a macro split of 42 protein, 24 fat, and 34 carbs, which is actually a really, really nice split. So the fats are not too low. I don't like going below 20% of fat because, of course, you need fats to balance your hormones and to absorb your micronutrients. So look, 24% of my diet being fat, I'm pretty happy with that. And again, 42% protein. Yes, it's still on the higher protein level, which is good. And what I'll do from now on is if I'm at 34% carbs, what it means is any further cuts I need to make to my diet, then I've got plenty of room to play with on the carb macros. So I think this split could actually work quite well. So look, it's not something that I would usually do, but prepared to give it a go. And that's something that you need to think about on comp prep as well. If something's not working, be prepared to. There's two things you could do. You can either keep slogging away, or make a quick decision, change it, and go with something else. So look, I'm only 5 weeks in, got a long way to go. So actually, I didn't tell you that, but the show that I thought was in August and then I thought was in June is now not in June, it's now in October. So I now have even longer to go, but that gives me leeway to find some other earlier shows, and I have the opportunity, I have the potential to go. I could even go to Greece in June. There's all sorts of opportunities I've got, but now what it means is I've got a long time to prep. Pressure's kind of off, which is good. So it means that I don't have to come in quite so quickly. But like I say, I am going to set this new split at a 15% deficit. So if I can start losing at about 1/4 kilo a week, then we should still do it. I have actually worked out exactly what I do need to lose at, and I do need to lose at 0.4, an average of 0.4 kilograms a week. But once, like I say, I really feel that I'm on this tipping point of getting some good steady weight loss. So I'm just going to set it at a 15% deficit, give it a week to see how this new macro split sets in, and then we'll go from there. So this is the thing. Anytime you make a change, always give it at least a week, if not two, to settle in before you decide on making some other changes. Okay, so like I say, this new split, I'll give it at least a week, probably even two. Now that the pressure's off, I actually have the luxury probably of giving this 2 weeks at this level to see what changes and how I come in. So that's actually a pretty long roundup. What I've done as well this week with my comparisons, you can actually see. I haven't got it up with me, but I will put it up. So what I've done is I've actually done a comparison of the second week of my prep and where I am now, week 5. So there's only 3 weeks difference, just to see what's changed. Still looking a little chubby through the middle, but you can see there wasn't much break between my butt and my hamstrings here, but now you can start to see I've actually lost off the back of my hamstrings. So my hamstrings are coming in, which is really quite nice. I am a little thinner through the middle, but you can start to see that there's a bit of a break now between my shoulders. There was, it was really flat there. I'm starting to get some shape through my shoulders, which is really nice. So not much difference there, but again, just maybe a hint of change through my shoulders. And then here, like really, really flat, no shape at all. Now you can start to see some shoulder and bicep separation. So that's really good. Back photos, you can't really tell much, although it does look like my arse is not quite as huge as it was before, but a long way to go yet. So look, doesn't look like there's too much differences, and these are only 3 weeks apart. But like I say, I am starting to see some changes coming. So this is where photographs are also a really good measure. You can just, if you think that something's not happened, keep taking photographs and keep comparing your photographs, okay? Because photographs are really actually a very good way of indicating progress, even if things, by all intents and purposes, look like they're not shifting, okay? So I'll put those photographs up as well in the video. But that's probably pretty much it. So new change to diet, new macros. We'll just keep going from there. So look, I hope that's been helpful, and you have a good week, and I'll talk to you next week. Take care.